We're live. So there we go. I mean, Seth, it's a real pleasure. It's been running through my head for maybe the past 2, 3 weeks. How the blooming heck I start a session like today? Because I'm just so delighted that you've spent the time with us. You are part of my marketing story with your writing and your speaking. And I suspect that for the folks listening in today, um, you are part of their story too. So thank you first and foremost for A, giving us your time, and then B, your contribution to our industry in general, because I think there are so many people who just hold so many good emotions to you. So
That's very kind. I will tell you honestly, I get more out of this than you do. So it's a privilege and a pleasure. Thank you for doing the work.
I'm not sure about that, but I am not going to get into a competition with you. So let's get started. And you've been in my ears for the past couple of weeks because obviously I've been trying to do my research and ask really smart questions. And I couldn't help but go back to a Tim Ferriss episode from 2019, where he was asking you about coffee beans and honey vodka, and you sort of being involved in the craft of these things. And he also looped in themes about audio equipment and how your answer sort of spoke about the craftsmanship of these things and sort of the joy and the beauty of being in them. Now, the Marketing Meetup is a community for marketers, so I can't help but sort of take this into our realm. And I'm curious, like, how romantic do you get about the craft of marketing? You know, is it quite a functional sort of task, or do you sort of get not weepy-eyed at the eye of of certain adverts, but how do you emotionally respond to the thing that we do?
What a great place to begin. Um, so, to catch people up who weren't there 5 years ago, uh, craft for me isn't the idea that, it's a misshapen piece of pottery, but a person made it so it's better. Craft is deciding to acquire the skill, to demonstrate empathy, to produce something that's better than you could have gotten away with. And I love craft in all its forms. Uh, what I said to Tim is I don't drink coffee, but I do enjoy the craft of finding the beans, roasting the beans, grinding the beans, serving the beans, watching if it resonates with somebody. And I have two responses when I see different levels of craft in the world. The first one, the one you've highlighted, is the one I need to focus more on, which is satisfaction and joy. When I
Mhm.
see something in a field that I'm familiar with, like a book cover, that is beautifully crafted, it does light me up. It makes me feel like better is possible. Because I'm in my 60s lately, it's more of the grouchy get off my lawn when I see artlessness. Because artlessness is the opposite. So in our
Yeah.
field, to pick the most banal tactics to begin with, if I get an email that says, "Dear first name," in all capital letters, I roll my eyes. That when a vice president at JP Morgan Chase sends me a poorly crafted mail merge spam because he
Mhm.
heard Tim Ferriss mention my name, I should just hit delete, but I can't help myself. So I'll write back and explain. He probably jumped on the lawn of the wrong guy on the wrong day. Maybe he wants to read one of my books because he is wasting his time and mine. He is undermining the craft.
Mhm.
And so I invented email marketing a very long time ago. And part of my mission has been to remind marketers that it's not a hack and a race to the bottom, that eventually it's all going to go to spam and we're going to have to build better filters. But until that happens, there's a chance to raise the bar, not lower it. And so that's a motivation for a lot of the writing that I do. The work I do is to encourage people to see craft as an opportunity. And for me personally, I just, if I go to a new kind of retail establishment or watch a nonprofit raise money in a different way, I feel like humanity still has some legs in it.
Mhm. I love that. I mean, in your writing, you often speak about, you use words like joy, and when you even spoke about the coffee beans there, you spoke about serving them, and to me that speaks to generosity. You don't even drink the coffee. You find the joy in serving the coffee to others. And then you kind of loop in the idea of like permission marketing and sort of thinking about this idea of, you're trying to do something better than what you get away with, like what you just said. Is that the foundational element of marketing, your view on the marketing world, really, that it has to be based in generosity, or are there more applicable terms that feel relevant to what we
Okay,
explore
so
together?
let's get our words right. Marketing isn't advertising. It's not hype. It's not hustle. Marketing used to be advertising, but
Hmm.
the internet turned that upside down. Marketing is anything that touches the market.
Yeah.
And that's the way you answer the phone. It's your pricing. It's the stuff you dump in the river. It's the way your employees feel. Everything in the organization touches the market. So everything in the organization is marketing. So if we begin from that, then if you're asking me, what is the shortest, straightest route from here to where we seek to go?
Hmm.
It's empathy.
Hmm.
Because other people don't know what we know. They don't want what we want. They don't see what we see. If we can't forgive that, then we're going to be yelling at people.
Hmm.
But on the other hand, if we can see it, we have a chance to say, I'm not you, but I'm imagining people like you who want something like this might find that this helps them get to where they want to go.
Hmm.
If we do that, you can call it generosity. Generosity is confusing to some people because
Hmm.
generous doesn't mean free. Generous
Hmm.
doesn't mean giving it away. Generous means applying emotional labor and effort to bring empathy to solve somebody else's problem.
I love that. And I think it it feels appropriate to point out those terms because, to give an example of a low cost carrier, airplane, the empathy in that situation is not about presenting an experience which is first class. The empathy is about realizing that someone wants to get from A to B quite quickly or effectively, and so and so in that case, I can definitely see how generosity wouldn't be a word that would apply in that. Actually, I love that
Well,
reframe.
I love that you're giving that example because a lot of people like to pick on, Ryanair for being so straightforward about their brusqueness. But I got to give them points for saying if you want us to pretend that this is like British Air, you're in the wrong place. We're
Yep.
here to tell you we are running a bus line in the sky and we're going to play all these games with you about money because you flew this airline because you want to play games around money. And there's a consistency there that is in fact quite generous. Yeah.
I agree. No, clarity is kindness sometimes, and knowing who you are, your positioning, beautiful. I too am very fond of them for that. Um,
Not that I would fly them though. That's a whole other.
Sometimes there is no choice, and maybe there's an empathy in that as well. I don't know. I love that. So you've been in the industry. You pointed to being in your 60s now, so I don't think it's unfair for me to say you've been in the industry for a while now.
Mm-hmm.
And what was interesting, so the first thing you need to know is that I went out to the community and I said to them, "We're going to be speaking with Seth." And you should have seen the excitement from folks. So there were so many folks who came in with lots of questions, and I'm actually going to be lacing them in throughout the duration, and I'll make sure to.
I'm sure they won't be as good as your questions have been so far, but we'll tolerate
Well,
them.
bless you. You're very, very kind. Um, but a lot of the questions, if I was to pick up on the theme that folks were interested in, was about change and this idea of what has changed. And I think what we've focused on already in the sort of 11 minutes that we've had already is about the things that have stayed the same. And I don't want to get too lost in this because, we all know the Jeff Bezos quote, focus on the things that stay true in 10 years. That's the thing that you can build a strategy on. But there are some things that have changed, in recent times. So just reflecting on perhaps the last 5 to 10 to 15 years, whatever time frame you think is applicable, what have you seen that's changed in the marketing space that is observable and meaningful in terms of the day-to-day for our roles?
Well, let me start with two. The first one is the triumph of convenience.
Mm-hmm.
Tim Wu has written eloquently about how human beings in the privileged world will trade almost anything for convenience. They'll trade their privacy, they'll trade money, they'll trade lots of patience if something is going to be more convenient. And the thought that I can click a button and get a custom made whatever delivered to my home tomorrow, where it used to take 2 months, is just astonishing. So the reason that's useful for a marketer to know is if you are counting on winning by being the more convenient one, you have a problem because it's very hard to be the most convenient one. That creates the conditions for you to win by being less convenient but worth it. And that's never going to get you giant scale, but it might get you loyalty. It might get you some of the other things that you see.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second thing I would say is that we have been indoctrinated by a media industrial complex to become cynical and short-sighted and divisive. And people view a lot of these interactions as sport.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I've been telling people lately with some of my new writing is don't enter a game you can't win. And if you have a prospect or a customer that wants to have a fight, it's entirely appropriate to say, I hear you, we're not for you. Thank you very much. Here's the phone number of someone who might be able to help you. It's so much better than you trying to persuade them that they shouldn't want to have a fight. Mm-hmm. Because getting someone to change their mind is really hard.
Yeah. Thank you. That's really lovely. And I can't help but follow on from that second point and ask, what's bringing you joy at the moment in our profession? What's putting a smile on your face? Because there is a lot of divisiveness, but I'm picking up on joy as a word you use or seem to use. And
so what I remind myself of is in every survey, in almost every country, people say they don't like the elected representative body that is running the country, but they are very fond of their particular elected representative, regardless of which district they live in. That people have very little trouble yelling and screaming at a stranger who cut them off in traffic, but are hesitant to yell and scream at their neighbor. And I think part of the reason for that expansion is we are now encountering far more strangers than ever before. And that when you take a social network and decide that for fun, you're going to spend your $42 billion to create a punching match, don't be surprised if strangers show up to punch each other, because that's what you invited them to do. So for me, I find more joy by just walking away from that, ignoring that, pretending that they're over there, they can do it. There've always been bare knuckle, illegal boxing matches that you could visit or not visit. And instead, I think about people I know who are running institutions, some nonprofits, some people like you, who are showing up to make connection happen and are doing it with right mind, right spirit, open heart. And that's happening more than ever before, not less, more. It just doesn't get a lot of publicity. There are fewer people percentage-wise at the worst levels of poverty on the planet that have ever been there before. And there is all these threads of possibility. It's just the narrative is missing. So the opportunity is to find your people, organize your people, connect your people, and then create the conditions for it to happen again. And to just walk away from the bare knuckle fighting, because they need an audience, but it doesn't have to be you.
Thank you. I can't help but reflect on your answer as you give it, and when I mentioned I'll be speaking to you, one of my closest friends, Max, said, I listen to Seth's podcast all the time. And then and then he stopped doing it. You know, um, and there was it strikes me in your answer there's a single-mindedness in you, or a willingness in you to kind of walk away from something even if there's apparent benefits in other ways, if it doesn't feel, like the right thing to do. And I'm curious, on a very personal level rather than sort of the marketing world, how you found comfort with that, because it's actually quite an enviable character trait that I think a lot of people would like to pick up for themselves if they could.
Well, first, thank you, Max, for listening. The podcast will be back in the fall. I made 5 years worth of episodes, and by the time you're done listening once a week after 5 years, you're not going to remember what I said in the first one, so you can start over again. I put it on hold because COVID was tough for me, and finding the breath to be able to do it was consuming a lot of me. And what I realized was there were 5 years worth. So let's just let that go, so I will find empty space to go fill with something else. And I think that opportunity cost and sunk costs are two things people don't really understand. Opportunity cost says if you're going to have a fluffernutter sandwich, you can't also eat a chickpea sandwich at the same time, one or the other. When you choose anything, there's all these other things you're not choosing. Opportunity costs are real. Sunk costs, on the other hand, are not. Sunk costs are decisions you made yesterday, gifts from your former self, that you worked really hard to get a law degree. 7 years later, you hate being a lawyer. It doesn't matter that you have a law degree. That was a gift from the you of yesterday. You can say, thank you, I don't want it. And so 5 years of Akimbo is a sunk cost. I don't have to keep doing it just because I did it. It was a gift from my listeners and me back and forth. And knowing that I can pick it up again in the fall because I have new work coming out, that makes me happy. But if I couldn't, that's okay too. But you need to make new decisions based on new information, because you don't get tomorrow over again.
I quite often will say, a life lived without regret is just making the best decisions you can with the information that you have at the time, and so the fact that you've allowed yourself to do that on a day-by-day basis is pretty incredible.
It's not that I allow myself. It's that I cajole and often force myself to do it. That this is a discipline. It's a discipline like someone who runs every day. If you wake up every morning thinking, I have to do X, Y, and Z, what I learned from Kevin Kelly is if someone invites you to do something in 3 months, don't put it on your calendar if you don't want to do it tomorrow, right? That if I can fill my day with things that I scheduled a long time ago that I'm looking forward to, that's a good day.
That is a very good day. Like today. So, we've done well. It actually reminds me of a quote from a friend, Jeremy Connell-Waite, who is a storyteller at IBM. He crafts the stories at IBM. And he says, sometimes you got to make the space to just stare at the clouds. And it strikes me when you were speaking about the story about, just stepping out and stepping back and giving yourself, or forcing yourself, cajoling yourself to give yourself that opportunity to think. That feels important and not easy to do, but when you can, absolutely fantastic. And almost as if I planned it, Jeremy actually donated a question as well. And he asked about Purple Cow. And so Jeremy is a fantastic marketer in himself, but there you go. Honestly, I love that. So you sent those out with every book, didn't you, in the first instance?
Actually,
those cards.
The book is inside it.
Amazing. That's fabulous. See,
so I don't think you're not from around here, but this is what milk comes from in the U.S., not in Canada. In Canada, it comes in plastic bags. Yeah. I don't know what milk. Now I think in Europe it's mostly in aseptic packaging, but this is the way it comes in the U.S. All right, so here's the deal. This container in order to make one of these, printing them is very cheap, but you need $1 million machine to fold it and glue it. You can't buy one. So I'd been kicked out of the publishing world from my previous book. That's a whole other story. And my friend Lionel Poulin died in a tragic helicopter crash. His wife died as well. And I wanted to dedicate a book to him because it was the best way I could think of to honor him. But I didn't have a book and I didn't have a publisher. So I wrote Purple Cow in a few weeks, and but I still didn't have a publisher. So I decided to publish it myself. And I made 10,000 copies, but I decided to take my own advice and mail it in this as the envelope. So like you can see right here, for people who are listening, I'll just describe it. It's got the return address and it says first class mail, and there's a big spot for the label. So I had a column in Fast Company, and in the column I reprinted a couple chapters of the book. I said, if you want a book for free, send me $5 for postage and handling. I'll mail you the book. So I was going to break even on that. But now I had a problem, which is I needed to figure out how to get the milk carton folded with the book inside. You can't do this at a dairy because dairies are wet and clean, and books are dry and not clean. So I looked and I figured out, at least in the US, Epsom salts come in milk cartons. And so I found an Epsom salt factory in New Jersey, and I paid the guy to shut down the Epsom salt line for a day and put my books in instead. Then the other part of the story is, I'm very proud of the copy on this thing. I wrote the copy a very long time ago, but I have on it things like, while this is a natural product, human consumption is not recommended, except for page 32, which is actually pretty tasty. And I have all this milk reference on there. And on the package, it said, unlike your organization, this milk is not homogenized or pasteurized or something like that. I put it in a line that sort of made fun of homogenization and pasteurization.
Yeah.
And I get a call from the people who are printing the thing, International Paper, who print most of the milk cartons. And they say, and it's only 2 days before the deadline, they say, we're not going to be able to print your milk carton. I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, we don't like what you wrote on the side of it. We think you're making fun of the milk industry. I said, oh, I didn't realize International Paper was in the censorship business. And they said, oh, we're not censoring it. We're just not going to print it. And I said, all right, I'll take that line out, but I'll be able to tell that story for the rest of my life. So that was the trade-off. Anyway, you had asked a question about the milk carton. So there you go. That's the story of the milk carton.
I love that, but I think it reminds me of, I know that you know Derek Sivers, and the confirmation email that he used to send out after someone ordered from CD Baby. And so for those listening in who haven't heard this, Derek sent the most elaborate, beautifully written, over-the-top email confirmation when someone ordered a CD from his business. And it was absolutely fabulous. It went viral on Reddit, and Derek's story is fabulous because eventually he went on to sell CD Baby and has done all sorts of good stuff since. But the thing I love about that, and the thing I love about the carton, is that it's easy to miss these things. It's easy to miss these moments and go, okay, we're just going to send in an envelope. Oh, we're just going to do an order confirmed. But to have that little bit of lateral thinking and go, okay, we're going to make the most of this moment. That's fabulous. But this is very important. This is not a gimmick, and neither was Derek's email. This was a service. And the reason it was a service is I discovered afterwards that many of the people who got the milk carton left it on their desk. Why would they leave it on their desk? They weren't rooting for me. They didn't know me. They left it on their desk because if their boss asked, what is that? Their status would go up because they were a pioneer. If their coworkers said, what is that? They could teach them about the purple cow. So their jobs would get better. They needed a flag to fly. And the thing about CD Baby, before streaming, it was the place to buy obscure self-published CDs. If you're the kind of person who likes music like that, you tend to be evangelical about it. You want your friends to like it too. But it's hard to email them a note without music attached to it. Hmm.
But when Derek's note was so clever and funny, it gave the recipient a chance to show their status and earn affiliation with others by
Hmm.
spreading it. That's
Hmm.
why he did it, not because he was showing off.
No, no, oh, absolutely not. No, yeah, and you're so right. I mean, it's those shareable moments, isn't it?
Right.
Exactly to your point, which is fabulous. And I'm just jealous. I'd like a milk carton. So, it works. I've actually, because I ordered Purple Cow last week on Amazon, and it just came as the book,
Yeah.
So
There was only
it's
5,000 of them. Yeah.
yeah.
Sorry.
But let's get to Jeremy's question because it is a good one. Which he says, since you wrote the book Purple Cow 22 years ago, which he puts in brackets, one of the best marketing books ever written. What does a purple cow look like to you in 2024?
It's exactly the same. It's
Hmm.
an idea worth talking about. It's not a gimmick. Will it
Hmm.
raise my status, my affiliation, or my utility if I tell other people about this? So, why do I talk about Claude.ai? Because Claude won't work better if other people use it for me, but in my role as a teacher and a guide, me telling you about this thing that will change your life for the better makes me look good. That makes
Hmm.
it remarkable. On the other hand, when I get, some giant box mailed to me unsolicited containing a pretty good book and a lot of junk inside, I'm not going to tell anybody about that. Why would I? Right? You
Hmm.
went to a lot of trouble to gimmick it up, but you
Hmm.
didn't serve me. And so a purple cow remains, and it's not just selling a book. It's how do you get, your local government to change its policy about leaf blowers, right? Well, you will do that by coming up with something that the people who agree with you can talk to get the other people to go along.
No, perfect. I love it. And I think again, sort of speaking to the Jeff Bezos quote, these things stay the same, which is just lovely. It's reassuring, if anything, because I think we are living in a time which feels like we're moving between ages, and to be able to sort of point to these principles time and
Yeah.
time again feels um, feels reassuring. It feels like your shoulders can relax a little bit, which is really quite lovely. Um,
The interesting thing, just to put a small aside, I think that Jeff understood that you can gain velocity by having the plane fly lower and then it will take you higher.
Mhm.
And his most important work at Amazon was a series of those, a series of how do I uh, trade to the bottom so I can get enough momentum to scale up.
Mhm.
And the problem is that less imaginative management will just race to the bottom.
Mhm.
They will not serve their workers. They will not serve their employees. They will just serve the stock price. And
Mhm.
that will work for a while and then it will stop working. And that's what
Mhm.
always happens. And
Mhm.
so we have to be very careful not to conflate that wise piece of advice from Jeff with the temptation that bureaucracies and systems have to just keep ratcheting in one direction.
Mhm. That's very true. And so, uh, what in that same interview with Tim Ferriss, I sort of I heard you speak to the willingness to acknowledge that you've been wrong at points, and you seem really proud of your failures, almost more proud of your failures than you are of your successes in many ways. Um, is there a common theme in when you've realized things need to change and that, whatever idea you've had or those moments of failure are um, actual failures versus a moment where you just need to push through and keep going for the next 10 years? Because I think there is that race to the bottom, but then
Mm-hmm.
that could also be an adjustment period, or that could be, just a
Yeah.
dip in the economy or something like that. I mean, has there been a common theme in those failures where you've been like, okay, now's the time to stop, or indeed now is the time to push and keep on going with a particular idea? Um,
Okay, so I think we're conflating two things here.
mhm.
There is the dip, which
Mhm.
is there's a hard part between where you are and the other side.
Yeah.
What I wrote about in the dip is that the most practical way to think about that is someone else before you has been on this road.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in the gym in February, there is a dip and most people quit. And the people with six-pack abs are the ones who make it till April, right? And if you're in organic chemistry and it's completely beating you up, every doctor you've ever met has made it through. There's a dip. It's there on purpose.
Yeah.
That's different than project mismatch, project failure, where you made a series of assertions about something that might not work and something that might work. You executed on those assertions pretty well, and it didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's a sunk cost.
Mm-hmm.
Now, every day you stick with it is an opportunity cost. So I've done a lifetime of projects. And the thing that I'm proud of is that I never fail exactly the same way twice.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to fail with grace.
Mm-hmm.
So, the way I got kicked out of the book publishing world is my book, Survival is Not Enough, which came out 2 weeks after 9/11, was ornate and sophisticated. It took me 8 hours a day for a year to write. Charles Darwin wrote the foreword. There were sophisticated metaphors about evolution in it. And it just didn't match what my audience was ready for. Mm-hmm. And so I learned something about the limits of what a publisher could do to bring something like that. And so you turn around and you follow that with Purple Cow and The Dip.
Mm-hmm.
And those books transformed my career because I wasn't trying to be the fanciest author in town. I was trying to be of service, right?
Yeah.
I was a pioneer in the DVD world, but once it became clear that the internet was going to be a more convenient, resilient alternative to making expensive DVDs, I was like, yeah, I have a great DVD team, but no one wants to buy these things. So we're not going to do that anymore. But if I hadn't built the DVD team, then I probably wouldn't have been smart enough about the way the world was working to build Yoyodyne. And so you just, I regularly shut down projects. I have, 7 unwritten, half-written books on my hard drive. But that's okay. You can't have a finished book unless you're willing to have a half-finished book.
That's fabulous. I just think it's it's making me smile as you speak, because I think there's a lot of clarity in your thought, and I mean that much is obvious, because you're Seth Godin, but nonetheless to hear you speak in that way about those things, it's one of those things that kind of makes sense. So thank you for speaking to that, and clarifying as well, and bringing me on that journey. Inevitably, a lot of the questions, and I think because of who you are and the place you hold in the industry, people look to trends and are interested what people think. And so I don't know how much joy you find in speaking about AI, but it is what the people want. And I think if there's one thing I heard in your answer there is you can be the person who creates something that nobody wants, or you can also do something which folks want to engage in too. And with that thought, AI has come into the industry, and it has hit every industry in lots of different ways. And I'm going to ask a terrible question because it's too broad. It's way too broad. But AI in marketing, thoughts?
It's not too broad. So just read a stat yesterday. Web copy written by AI outperforms human copy in a straight up click test. Why is this surprising? Of course it does. Because web copy, on average, is mediocre hack work that isn't conceptual and shifting the narrative of the brand. It's just how do I make a word salad that people click on?
Hmm.
And if you're not using this free, always on, thoughtful assistant to make your work better when you are doing mediocre work, that's malpractice, right? Um, if you're a mediocre radiologist, I've got an AI that can read a wrist x-ray better than you can for free, instantly. So you can argue all you want about this. You can go to the licensing board about this, or you can say, oh, maybe my job is now to use this tool, not to fight this tool. I was here when fonts arrived, when they used to be called typefaces. And all the typographers freaked out. And my life is over. This is not fair. What are you doing? And but it didn't stop it from happening. The smart one said, oh, look at this great new tool I've got. I'm going to use it better than all the amateurs that are just going to hack away at it.
Hmm.
So the first place I begin is the history of technology is that it invents jobs. It doesn't destroy them over time. We've invented 6 billion jobs since I was born. Where'd they all come from, right? And your competence, your skill, your professionalism shouldn't be based on the fact that there isn't a cheap computer that can do your job instead of you. You have to figure out how to restate what you do. Most people I know who work in marketing organizations use the word branding wrong. They're actually talking about their logo, and they misunderstand what it is to be a strategic marketer. It's going to be a very long time before AI gets around to solving the strategic marketing problem. When Eve invented the strategic marketing decision that Patagonia wasn't going to be in the warmth business, they were going to be in the community of people who care about the climate business and who demonstrate that feeling by wearing a logo, that's a strategic marketing decision. You can ask Claude all day long to come up with one of those for you. It will not do so. So if you have tools that can take care of the mediocre tasks and chores, you better spend your free time becoming focused on strategy. And strategy is a philosophy of becoming. It is the hard work of deciding what tomorrow is going to be like, not doing your job.
Love that. Love that. Thank you. You mentioned Patagonia as part of that answer, and I know that you wrote a forward. I think it was a forward for the Carbon Almanac, as one of your many servings to authors out there, to help them get a foot on. And so far as I'm aware, having spoken to Thomas Barter last week, then you're spending a little bit of your time sort of thinking about how marketers can be addressing and playing a role in the environmental challenges in the world at the moment. And so there is a school of thought, particularly in the UK, and I don't know whether this is reflected in the US, but there's a whole debate around the idea of marketing purpose. And the purpose of marketing is 99 times out of 100 to further commercial goals and to build a business that makes more money, because that is how most organizations are set up, and that's fair. Nonetheless, I'm interested, when you are looking at these two interests that you have, how you see them working together, and whether indeed it is part of marketing and marketers' responsibility to be thinking about these things, or whether that's just a human responsibility in general that we should all be holding.
So I spent a year and a half as a full-time unpaid volunteer organizing the Carbon Almanac. So there were 1,900 of us in 90 countries. It was the most thrilling project of my career. These people are still my friends and will be forever. It was extraordinary to be able to work on it. It helped us find solace and understanding and empathy, and also collect 97,000 words worth of facts, charts, graphs, and tables. The book has been a bestseller in 6 or 7 countries. Really proud of the work that we did. And you are highlighting the fact that 110 years ago in Texas and Pennsylvania, they started to find really cheap oil coming out of the ground.
Hmm.
And we have built the world we live in today, basically turning cheap oil into stuff that makes people's lives more convenient and productive. And it has made the world rich. But we have underpriced the cost of that fuel the whole time. We've underpriced it because it has a huge impact on everybody. So we are now at this point where organizations have so many more people to sell to and so many more tools to make the stuff they make that hopefully we can stop seeking the shortcut of making crap for large numbers of people that then just gets thrown out. You asked whether marketers have a responsibility. So I think if we were having the following conversation: one, does advertising and marketing work?
Hmm.
I hope we can agree the answer is yes. If not, then you're stealing your company's money. Two, is it okay for a marketer to run a nationwide lobbying and advertising campaign to make crack legal, even for children? Because they would make a lot of money as a crack manufacturer if they could get people addicted to it. I hope we
Hmm.
can all agree that no, that would not be ethical.
Yeah.
Even it might be legal to run these ads, legal to do this lobbying. You shouldn't be proud that you want to do that.
Hmm.
And so my whole mindset is if you're not proud of it, don't ship it. You
Hmm.
say you need a job. I get it, but you don't need this job. You don't need to be selling Juul vapes to 16-year-olds to get them hooked, scramble their brains with nicotine for the rest of their lives. That
Hmm.
I'm getting all animated here. I gave a talk years ago. There were 2,000 people there. I said, any questions? This guy in like 40 rows back raises his hand and says, I'm a cigarette marketer at Philip Morris. Do you have any advice for me? I was like, yeah, quit. Like, no, I'm not going to give you advice on how to get people addicted to something that's going to kill them.
Mm.
So here's what we know. And if you haven't read Ministry for the Future, I hope that you will. It's a novel. Novels can propel you more than a book like the Carbon Almanac, but buy both.
Hmm.
It's completely based on things that we know to be true. That
Hmm.
in the next 5 or 10 years, 15 million people are going to become climate refugees. They're going to lose their homes and the place they live is going to be underwater. And the list of all the bad things keeps going on and on. And you're saying, yeah, but I need to make a living to feed my family, so I'm going to keep lobbying against this or fighting for that. I'm like,
Hmm.
no, please don't do this. You have
Mm.
enough skill and talent. You have enough privilege to show up and actually do marketing that makes things better. So, what would better look like? I think there are two things that marketers can really think about. One is we have the chance to sell people, to cajole people, to connect people to brands and ideas that actually don't use a lot of carbon, but give people a lot of joy.
Hmm.
And what was the point of all the damage we did and all the wealth we created if we can't sell people on something that gives them connection and joy?
Hmm.
And then the second one is, this is me speaking personally, not for the Almanac team,
Hmm.
is the market caused this problem and the market can solve this problem. And the way to
Hmm.
do it is to charge a fair price for carbon and
Yeah.
to distribute all of the money we collect in a dividend check. If we
Hmm.
just did that simple thing, all the people who make things that use carbon would instantly shift their posture because price is a signal.
Hmm.
And the market would go to work overtime to fix this problem. And we need more marketers to help, because if marketing can't save the world, I don't know what can.
I love it. Thank you very much. Like,
That was
I
a
think
rant, but I'm happy to share it.
no, a rant is good, and actually, I'm speaking personally here, but I think when you're exposed to certain sets of information and you always take it in, then sometimes it takes something like what you've just said to sort of jolt you a little bit, and so thank you. You may characterize it as a rant. I characterize it as a series of thought-provoking provocations. So thank you. Um, we're drawing to the end of our time, but I've got a few general questions that
Okay.
I'd like to throw your way before we do. Um, So, what marketing lesson do you think has stood you in the best stead throughout your career?
It's a coin with two sides on it. And one side is every time I've been tempted to hustle or look for a shortcut, I have regretted it.
Hmm.
And the other side is every chance I get to make connection and turn on lights with generosity, I'm glad I did.
I don't think that's two sides of two different coins. I think that's a very similar coin. That's a one-sided coin with two sides. Oh, I don't know.
It's a
That's
Mobius
too
coin. It's a Mobius coin with a twist in the middle.
I'm glad you saved me there, so thank you. Um, but thank you. That's lovely and I think true. Certainly true to our experience as well with everything that we've ever done. I don't think honesty or helping has really ever really failed to help, which is really fabulous. That sounds like a lesson that you've learned from experience. I guess similarly, one of the questions that was offered from the community was who were your mentors or who are your mentors and what key lessons did they impart on you that you still find valuable?
So I wrote a blog post 15 years ago called Mentors and Heroes.
Hmm.
Uh, Mentors are a clever idea, but they don't scale very well. And they're a
Hmm.
great place to hide because you say, if I only had a mentor, I would be safe.
Yeah.
I had accidentally, my first boss, boss's boss, became a really important figure in pushing me when I was ready to be pushed, but most bosses wouldn't have done it. And I've always been grateful to David for that. But most of my lessons have come from heroes, not mentors. I've been lucky enough to meet and sometimes work with my heroes, but that's not required. A hero is somebody where you can say, what would so and so do? What would Zig do? And
Hmm.
Zig doesn't even have to know you exist. And
Hmm.
that's beautiful because it allows you to remove one more excuse. So I got to work with Tom Peters. I got to publish Zig Ziglar. Jay Levinson and I wrote a whole bunch of books together. There are people who I call my dear friends, like Eveline Morse or Maria Popova, who aren't as famous, but I can ask myself what they would do.
Hmm.
And um, so I would spend very little time hustling for a mentor and a lot of time thinking, oh, all the models I need are right here. I just need to ask myself what this person would do.
That's fabulous. Thank you. Um, Final question, and I think we've covered quite a lot of this throughout the course of today, but you're here, and as I said, you played such a formative part in my career. Ended up rebuying this the other day, having listened to This Is Marketing, having listened to the audiobook on my dog walks for many years ago. And I think it's page 248. So one of the last pages in the book. You
One of
almost
my favorites, page 248. What does it say on page 248?
problem with having so many books.
This one's in a language I don't speak. Okay, yeah.
Well, I'll start to read it to you, but really it's sorry, 246. So you'll have to forgive me. So terribly wrong. But you simply asked this question, which is, and it's only three words that I'll read out, which is marketing evil? And that's something that has sat with me ever since I, started marketing and something I check in on regularly. And so I can't remember the year that This Is Marketing was published actually, but
I think it's like 3 years ago, 2 years ago, two and a half.
okay, okay. So the conclusion that I gained from your little few paragraphs on is marketing evil is that it's a tool like anything else, and it can be used for good and it can be used for evil. But as I say, I have revisited this thought time and time again over these sort of past few years. Does your view remain true? And I guess you alluded to this earlier about sort of seeking joy. Are you generally more positive or generally more negative about the opportunity in front of us?
So let's use a different word to help us decode this, which is manipulation.
Hmm.
Manipulation is when a marketer uses asymmetrical information to get you to do something that if you knew what they know, you would never do. And that's tobacco, right? Tobacco manipulates 16-year-olds into a life of illness. If a 16-year-old was capable of processing all the information, they would never do it. And so marketing is evil when it manipulates people into paths that they will regret. Marketing is generous and positive and important when it opens the door for people to do this generative work that they've wanted to do all along, to help them get to where they want to go. And so if you don't want to be an evil marketer, then don't manipulate people. Instead, figure out how to find the better angels of our nature and amplify them so that when people get to where they were hoping to go, they're glad they got there.
Love it. Love it, love it, love it. What a wonderful way to end 51, 52 minutes with you,
Well, this
Seth.
has been great. Your prep shows through, so does your heart and soul. And I really appreciate the work you're doing.
Goodness me. Well, that's the clip for social media as well. So thank you very much. I really appreciate you, Seth, and thank you for taking the time today. It's you said you didn't need to meet your heroes, but here we are. So there we go. So
You made
um,
my day. Enjoy yourself. I appreciate it.
bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.